comfort for troubled Christians.
Yes. Let us hear from heaven.
I read a story recently about these two men that were in the hospital, and both of them were very, very ill. And every day, there was one of them that would get 1 hour that the nurses would allow him to sit up and let the fluids travel through his lungs so that he wouldn't sit in there too long. And the other man that was in the hospital bed, he had to lay there day in and day out. And they both in this room were next to a window. And every day that this one man that could sit up out of his bed, and he would look out of this window and he would tell the other man what wonderful things he would see in this park and this pond and all of these swans and these people that were in love and holding hands and the blue skies and the birds that were chirping and just all of the wonderful things that he would see. And every hour he would do this. And every day this man would wait for that 1 hour that this other man would be able to sit up and tell him about all of these things that he saw out of this window. And eventually he got so jealous and he developed this resentment against this man. He started harboring anger against this man because he couldn't sit up and see out of this window. And so one night as this man woke up out of his sleep, he was choking. And the man that was laying down that couldn't sit up, he heard him choking. And he knew that he needed the nurse immediately or he would perish. And he had a little button on his bed that he could have hit himself to notify the nurse and let them know that this man was about to die, that he needed some help. He needed someone in there immediately to see about him. And he was so angry and so resentful against this man because he's the one that could see out of the window. He let this man die. And so the next morning when the nurse got in there and they found this man that he had died in his hospital bed and they carried him out and the man felt so bad as he started to realize what he had done. He was the cause of this man's death. He asked this nurse and he was telling him about all the days, the hours that he would spend telling him about all these things out of the window, and he wondered to himself, why would this man do this for me?
All right.
And the nurse says, you know what? This man was blind. I believe he did it to encourage you. And sometimes I believe God is the same way. See, he's looking out this window for us. And we're laying in this bed and we're just wondering what's out there. And if we just have a little faith of a mustard seed and just believe that what he sees out of that window is for our own good and for our best interest, and we'll lay there and be patient and be of good courage, that when the time comes for us to rise up ourselves and we get a chance to look out that window, we'll see through our eyes of faith as well. There might be a brick wall in your life today, but I want you to know that you keep pushing and that you look through your eyes of faith, because as Christians we walk by faith and not by sight. We don't work on the temporary things. We work on the things that are not seen. We work on the things that the world says that we cannot have, that the judges say that you have no right getting. But we serve a God. We serve a God that will. Yes, he will. He will fight your battle. He will stand in your corner. He will be there for your gospel. That ain't even what I came to preach. So to give you a little background about Job, you know, we all know Job. He was an upright man. You know that in chapter 1, the devil came and he says, well, consider your servant Job, you know. And he told God that the only reason Job was praising you and serving you is because you had blessed him with all of these things. He had money, he had wealth, he had family, he had the land and the oxen, and he had everything that a man would want. And so as we know the story goes, he moved that hedge from him, and that'll let you know right there that Satan can't do nothing that God don't let him do. God has to allow Satan. Cliff Wilson said the devil made me do it. No, he didn't. So as we see that story progressing and Job is struggling in his life and he was dealing with all of these things. He was bankrupt and homeless and helpless and childless. He was left standing beside the 10 fresh graves of his now dead children. His wife was weeping and having just heard him say, whether our God gives us or takes everything from us, we will follow him. And she leans over and secretly whispers, why don't you just curse God? what God is doing. Behind the scenes of a believer, he is still working. All humans ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? It's the age-old question and difficult to answer. But believers know that God is always in control. And no matter what happens, there are no coincidences. Nothing happens by chance. Job was a believer. He knew what God was on the throne and in total control, though he had no way of knowing why so many terrible tragedies had just happened in his life. The great lesson to be learned in this book is that the sovereign God is to still be trusted, even though we don't understand. Job is, and as we get into chapter 23, we see that Job is longing for God to hear his case. He's telling God, he says in verse 4, said, I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. See, Job is a battle going on with Job right now. He's trying to get God to hear his case, and he's saying, if I could just stand before God and let him hear what I'm going through, and let him see what I'm struggling with, and let him see the pain that I have. And if you have to understand that, see, up until chapter 38, God was silent. So we see right here, we come into this verse 10, and we see that before it, he's talking about if God would just hear my argument, that even today my complaint is rebellion. My hand is heavy despite my groaning. And he's just struggling with this, and he wants God to hear him, and he wants his day in court. How many of us right here have been in a moment where you said, man, if I just had my day in court, if I could just stand before God, if I could just state my argument and let him hear what I have to say. But as we see in verse 10, and I'm going to talk about three things. Job just wanted a fair trial, y'all. So we're going to talk about God's presence, God's pressure, and God's purpose. Point number one, God's presence. He says, but he knows the way that I take. See, Job was saying, I know that God is with me. Up until verse 10, he was having that battle. He wasn't quite grasping what was going on, and if he was grasping, he had that battle going on. He always waged war against that spirit and that flesh that it talks about in Galatians 5. You know, that spirit man and that flesh, we have that war going on at all times. He says, but I still have the utmost confidence. So he switched. It's almost like the maturity level has increased. And he's gone from a baby Christian, and he's gotten to his senses, and he has woken up. And he says, you know what? But God knows the way that I take. He says, though I cannot see him, yes, I see him. And he knows my integrity. See, it's not so important that we understand what the Lord is doing, but that God understands what we are doing. And see, he was glad that the Lord knew what he was doing. He was glad that the Lord knew his motives and his desires. And from the truth, he inferred that he would be helped in his trials and brought safely through. Now, let's look at this word but. Anytime you see the word but in the scripture, you need to know what the but is there for. And that but will always force you to go back in the passages before in order to understand what he's saying. So you see he's having that struggle in the first 9 verses, and then he gets to 10 and he's like, but he knows the way that I take. But we should automatically, and as Job is correcting himself for the wish that his cause should be known before God, so he says, when he hath tried me. And notice too, the present tense. He knoweth the way that I take. That's present. He knows the way that I take. It's talking about right now. Which, he says, or which I may take, but that I am actually taking now. Whether it suits my present strength, my present joy, my present knowledge, my present duty, my present grace, and he knows the exact meaning of the word that I take. When God puts his people in the furnace, he keeps his eye on the clock and his hand on the thermostat. See, we may not understand God, and there may be no evidence that God is listening, or maybe you're asking God why. Well, let me have my time in court to explain myself and defend myself. Maybe you've been crying out to God because you've been struggling. Maybe you've been crying out to God because you go to work every day and you still see the person across the street that don't know God, don't serve God, got a new car every year. They're prospering on Facebook. Every time you see a photo of them, they go on to another travel destination. And you struggling to make ends meet. You're honoring God in the area of your finances. And you come to church faithfully. You serve in the community. You're giving Him your best. But you're still wondering, God, where are you? Why am I still living this way? Do you not care what I'm going through? Do you not see that I love you?
My Lord, my God.
This world is in turmoil. The courts are denying God's word. Some of us have family members who are in jail. Christians are under attack all over the world. Our kids are running to the streets instead of running to the church. The divorce rate among Christians is raising higher and higher. But be of good courage, because He knows the way that you take. And He knows the way that this world is taken. He knows your heartache. And He knows your pain. Job didn't need his day in court. He already had a prosecutor. And he already had a defense attorney. But sometimes when you're under so much pressure and you're under so much duress, you don't see through your eyes of faith. That you just need to step back, go to Walgreens, get some Visine, and put some spiritual Visine in your ear. Have a Holy Ghost clarity. I read a story about a woman who kept looking out her window and she was complaining to her husband about the neighbor's laundry all the time. Does this woman not know how to wash her clothes? The whites were just dirty. Every Sunday she would hang her stuff out. And she was wondering, why in the world? Somebody, baby, I need to go over there and teach this woman about some Clorox. And the husband finally said, baby, you just need to clean your window. But the window she was looking out of was dirty. I'm telling somebody the other day that if you need to clean your glasses, call around and give them away for free. I ain't got the money for all that. See, it's from Walmart, courtesy card. You better go there and get some and clean it yourself. Because if you've been looking through your glasses and it's dirty, you're seeing the wrong thing. God wants you to see the things that He has for you, and it ain't what Joel Osteen said. It ain't living your best life now. If you living your best life now, what do you got to look forward to? I told you I'm going to get on out of here. Point number 2, God's pressure. He says, when He hath tried you. See, God will often pressure you to purify you. Suffering often comes as a result of an unseen conflict in that spiritual war. I told you in Galatians it talks about that we wage war, or Ephesians 6, we wage war not against flesh and blood, but the spiritual principalities, the rulers of this darkness, okay? And then in Galatians it talks about that we wage against that spirit man and that flesh, and then Paul says in Romans 7 that the things I will to do, I do not, but the things I don't want to do. I know I got some Bible. He says when I do good, evil is present. He says, first thing I want you to see is he says when. Not if, but when. Contrary to the charismatic movement and the faith movement, trials are a guarantee. You keep sending your money to Peter Popoff all you want. But James 1 and 2 says to count it all joy when you fall in the various times. John 16 and 33 says in this world you will have tribulation. He didn't say that it's a possibility. He didn't say that you might. He didn't say that you can. He said that you will. You know God can also do it. You will what? Fight your battle. He said, but be of good courage, because I have overcome the world.
You gotta go ahead.
Your donation will free you from the demon of debt. No, come to his credit class and that'll help you get from your freedom of debt. John 9 and 10 says, whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, if anybody comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, If anybody comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house or do not greet him. That type of doctrine destroys the foundation of faith. It's apostasy, and it leads people away from the genuine gospel preachers as this man right here. Still on the word when. Let's notice that when is a time phrase, which is defined as during that time. So in the verse, it refers to during the time of trial. That indicates that the trial has a finite lifespan. That word finite, it means that it has a definite limit. It has a divine disappointment. So Romans 8:18 says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us." Psalm 62:12 says, we went through the fire and we went through the flood, but thou brought us out into a wealthy place. And know those prosperity preachers will take that scripture and they'll tell you that it's going to bring you into a land of milk and honey. It's going to bring you into a land of health, wealth, and prosperity. But Jesus said the birds have nests and the Son of Man, foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So if our Lord and Savior didn't promise us health, wealth, and happiness, what? That wealthy place that he's talking about is salvation. That wealthy place is that spiritual growth. That wealthy place is that he said, I came to give you life and life more abundant. That abundant life is your eternal life. It's not this present life. It's the life afterwards, not the life here. Revelation says that we're just passing through. I got a place up there. He told us in John, he said, in my Father's house, there are many men. If it were not so, I would have told you so. I'm coming back because I got a place for you. Who's going with me? God, that's the people that are going with me. Stand up if you're going with me. He said, I'm going up and I'm going over yonder. David said, because I walk through the valley. He says, I walk through the valley. John Newton wrote, through many dangers and toil, I have already come. His grace that darkness saved his father, and grace that leads me home. Horatio Spafford, who lost his kids and his wife in the ocean, he came back, and as he traveled across that same ocean, he wrote that song that we know, whatever my lot thou hast taught me, it is well, it is well. So, Hebrews 6:19 says, this hope is an anchor for my soul. Though the storms may not cease, and the storms keep on raging in my life, my soul, my soul, my soul, Job 29:3, and when by his light I walk through darkness. There ain't no such thing as darkness. You can't go by a light bulb dark. There's only light. Darkness is just the absence of light. See, God never intended us to stay in the fire. Now, sometimes we need to be put back in the fire. But as Christians, we are neither submerged in the flood or consumed by the fire. If this was so, then we couldn't do like Matthew 5:16. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good deeds and give your heavenly Father the glory. You see, the thing about light is, Christ is like the light. It's here today and gone at night. All right? But see, when the sun goes down, there's something that comes up called the moon. And that moon actually has no ability to shine on its own. It is merely just a reflection from the sun. The moon ain't got no light. It possesses no quality. It possesses no illumination. It is only a reflection from the sun. And as you stand here today and you walk out on 51st and you hit your job Monday morning and you hit these streets with the gospel, you gotta remember that we are a reflection of our Savior. We're not acting like Christians. We're not talking like Christians. Sunday morning and call yourself a church. We gotta be a church. other man in your church don't mean he is in Christ Jesus. Those things may not be going the way you think. I will ask you to ponder this. How do you know they're not going the way they should be? Psalm 26:2 says, examine me, O Lord. Try my mind and heart. God tests the righteous. Job 13:15 says, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. I often hear that things are not going the way I planned or the way they should. But ask yourself one question. How do you know it's not going exactly the way in the world? There are many things that need to be pressure tested. And they need to be pressure tested before they can get used. Our plumbing gets pressure tested. In the oil and gas industry, I got a friend who sends water and things to these hoses before that they can be used. They get pressure tested. I used to work offshore as a chef. My last name, K-O-C-H, is actually a German name, and it literally means the surname to cook. And I've been in food service for 15 years. I've been a chef, and I'm a graduate from Le Cordon Bleu. So it's funny how things worked out. But I worked offshore on these dive vessels, and these dive vessels had these ROVs. It's a remote operated vehicle that would go down thousands of, almost up to 10,000 feet in the ocean. And can you imagine the strength that machine had to have been to handle that level of pressure? Have you ever been into a pool about 10 feet? I get down to about 10 feet and I gotta come on up. And these people, as I worked in the kitchen, and I gave them a cup one time, and I wrote a scripture on it, and I wrote something on it, and they hooked it up to this ROV, and they sent it was a 20-ounce styrofoam cup. We stuffed napkins in it, and they would send it down. They zip tied it to this ROV, and they would send it down. And whenever they brought it back up, it was about this big, the styrofoam cup. It was a regular 20-ounce cup, but when they brought it back up, it was about that big. So it couldn't handle the pressure. It had decreased in size, and it had shrunk. I still got it in my study today. So, and some people, as pastors so duly noted, have high blood pressure. And they can't put themselves in high pressure situations because they can't handle the pressure. You, me, we're the same way. When God gets ready to use you, He'll pressure test you first. If you fail and can't handle the pressure, this is not a bad thing. It just means that the engineers need to go back to the drawing board. And in our case, that engineer is God. And His engineering plan is the best plan. But the problem is that we don't follow the blueprint. We don't follow the plan that He has given us. I just mounted the TV on my wall, and you know, as I can speak for myself, I'll use I statements. I don't like following instructions. I can look at it, take it out of the box, and I say, I got this. And then my friend said, man, y'all better not slam the door. That thing mess around will fall off the wall. Follow the instructions. Point number 3, God's promise. He said, I shall come forth as gold. I shall come forth as gold. A promise comes when the refiner is submitted to. In the New Testament, the Greek word submit is hupostasso, a Greek military word which means to arrange the troops in military fashion under command of a leader. That is the same word submit when it talks about a wife should submit to their husbands. It's not a negative word. It's meaning that wife is to submit, fall under. It's just a military term. That's all it's meaning. Falling in the line of the rank and in the order that God has ordained things. So if we submit to His will, the furnace experience, painful as it may be, will refine us. And as a direct result, we'll be better for it. However, if we resist the refiner's pressure, if we resist His will and fail to feed on His truth, the furnace experience will burn us. It's not easy to destroy His precious gold and silver. And it's not His goal
is to consume the dross and bring out the beauty and the purity of that metal. See, fire cannot destroy gold. I remember a story somewhere in the Old Testament about 3 Hebrew boys. Daniel 3:25. He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High, come out and come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps and the prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of the fire on them. I see some people in here today that need to be loosed. I see some people in here today that need to be loosed from your drug problem. I see some people in here today that need to be loose from your worry, loose from your bad attitude, loose from your demons, loose from the things that are holding you back, loose from the troubles of your past, loose from your job, loose from the ability to do things for God because you have so much fear, loose from that struggle, loose from everything that's loose from that immorality. See, I know some people with some real issues, but we serve a real God. We serve a risen Savior. We serve a redemptive God. We serve a restoring God. We serve a righteous God. I want to shout right here like Nebuchadnezzar, "Come on out of there! Come here! Come out of that comfort zone! Come out of that furnace! Come out of that homosexuality! Come out of that cheating! Come out of that lying! Come out of that drug addiction! Come out of that alcoholism! Come out of that poverty and that poverty! Come here and receive God's goodness! Come here and receive God's forgiveness for your sins! Come here and give me those ropes and lay them down on this altar! Come here and give me that stuff that had you bound! Come on out of there today! I once was bound, but now I'm free. Whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Perhaps the greatest lesson we learn from the book of Job is that God does not have to answer to anyone for what he does or does not do. Job's experience teaches us that we may never know the specific reasons for suffering, but we must trust our sovereign God. He is holy and he is righteous. His ways are perfect. God, since his ways are perfect, we can trust that whatever he does and whatever he allows is perfect. We can trust that, and we can expect to understand that God's mind perfectly, as he reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither nor my ways are your ways. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my thoughts higher than yours." Our responsibility to God is to obey him. It is to trust him and to submit to his will, whether we understand it or not. When we do, we will find God in the midst of our trials, possibly even because of our trials. We will see more clearly the magnificence of our God, and we will say with Job, "My ears have heard, my eyes have seen." Glory to God. Thank you.
Alka-Seltzer wouldn't do it. But when you look up towards the heat, from whence cometh your help, and you call